The phone trembled in Natalie Crawford's hand. Her world collapsed with each word the secretary spoke. What training course? Mark took this week off as vacation days. The secretary's innocent response had just detonated Natalie's 15-year marriage like a silent bomb. She thanked the woman and ended the call, her knuckles white against the pharmacy counter. 3 days ago, Mark had kissed her goodbye with a suitcase packed for what he claimed was a mandatory engineering certification in San Diego. Natalie had even ironed his dress shirts. She had packed his favorite snacks for the hotel room. She had wished him luck on the final exam he'd fabricated from thin air. Natalie stared at her reflection in the darkened computer screen of her pharmacy. At 41, she had built this business from nothing while supporting Mark through career changes and promotions. Her long chestnut hair was pulled back in a professional bun, and her white coat hung perfectly pressed on her slender frame. She had always prided herself on maintaining control, on making rational decisions based on evidence. But right now, the evidence was destroying her from within. "Natalie, the Wilsons are here for their prescription," her assistant called from the front counter. She straightened her spine, applied a quick layer of her signature red lipstick, and stepped back into her professional role. "Coming right up," she replied, her voice betraying none of the devastation churning beneath the surface. The Wilsons had been customers for 12 years. They'd attended her and Mark's 10th anniversary party. They'd sent flowers when her father died last spring. And here she was, smiling and explaining dosage instructions while her marriage disintegrated in real time. That evening, Natalie sat alone at her kitchen island, a glass of untouched Cabernet beside her laptop. Their suburban home felt cavernous and foreign. 15 years of memories seemed to mock her from every corner. Their wedding photo on the mantel, the kitchen backsplash they'd installed together, the armchair where Mark read the Sunday paper, even the throw pillows she'd chosen to match his eyes now seemed like cruel jokes. Her fingers moved across the keyboard, searching for answers. 23 minutes and 41 seconds of research later, she found herself on the website for Alan Brooks Investigations. The testimonials described him as thorough, discreet, and compassionate. Natalie didn't need compassion. She needed truth. "Anderson Pharmacy, this is Natalie." She answered her cell phone the next morning, her voice crisp and professional despite having barely slept. "Mrs. Crawford? This is Alan Brooks returning your call." Natalie stepped into her office and closed the door. "Thank you for getting back to me so quickly, Mr. Brooks. Just Alan is fine. Your message mentioned a potentially unfaithful spouse?" The words hung in the air, clinical and stark. "Yes. My husband told me he's attending a training course in San Diego this week. His company confirmed he's actually on vacation days." "I understand," Alan said, his voice softening slightly. "I have an opening this afternoon at 3. We could meet at the coffee shop on 4th Street." At 2:57 that afternoon, Natalie spotted a man who could only be Alan Brooks at a corner table. In his early 50s, with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes that had likely seen every form of human deception, he stood as she approached. "Dr. Crawford?" he asked, extending his hand. "Natalie, please," she corrected, settling into the chair across from him. "Thank you for meeting me." Alan nodded, opening a leather portfolio. "I've been doing this for 26 years, Natalie. I wish I could tell you that your suspicions are probably unfounded, but in my experience, when someone's instincts are strong enough to call me, they're usually right." Natalie swallowed hard, twisting her wedding band. "I need to know where he really is. I need—" her voice caught. "I need evidence." 3 days later, Natalie's phone buzzed with a text from Alan. "Check your email. Found him." Her hands shook as she opened the message. There were 5 photos attached. The first showed Mark entering the Ocean View Resort and Spa in Malibu. The second showed him checking in at the front desk, his arm around a woman Natalie had never seen before. The third was of them toasting champagne on a private balcony overlooking the ocean. The fourth showed them walking hand in hand along the beach at sunset. The fifth was a screenshot of the resort booking, a luxury suite reserved for 7 nights under Mark and Chloe Crawford. Chloe. He'd given this woman his name. Alan's report was detailed and unemotional. Mark had checked into the couple's romance package at the Ocean View, one of California's most exclusive resorts. The woman was identified as Chloe Richardson, 32, a designer of interiors from Los Angeles. They'd met 6 months ago at a conference where she was redesigning the event space. They'd been seeing each other regularly since, with Mark inventing business trips and conferences to cover his absences. Natalie stared at Chloe's image. Younger, yes, but not drastically so. Beautiful in an effortless way with her flowing blonde hair and casual elegance. But what struck Natalie most was how happy Chloe looked, how genuinely, radiantly in love. This wasn't just an affair. This woman believed she had found her person. A cold clarity washed over Natalie as she reached for her phone. "Alan, I need one more thing from you." The next morning, Natalie sat in her office with the door closed, staring at her computer screen. She had just booked a room at the Ocean View Resort for the following week. The exact week Mark had already mentioned would require him to attend an advanced certification course. She had specifically requested the Serenity Suite, the same suite where her husband was currently staying with his mistress. But that wasn't all. Alan's additional research had revealed something that made Natalie's blood run cold. According to Chloe's social media and conversations with resort staff, she believed Mark was single. He had told her he'd never been married, that he was looking for the one, that he dreamed of starting a family for the first time. While Natalie had spent 15 years building a life with him, Mark had erased her entirely to create a fiction for his new love. As Natalie closed her laptop, a strange calm settled over her. She wasn't just going to confront her husband, she was going to dismantle his entire fabricated life, beginning at the same luxurious resort where he thought he'd gotten away with everything. What Mark didn't know was that his carefully constructed house of lies was built on sand, and the tide was coming in. The week crawled by in a surreal haze for Natalie. By day, she counted pills, consulted with patients, and maintained the precise, careful demeanor that had earned her pharmacy its sterling reputation. By night, she meticulously planned her approach. This wasn't just about confrontation. It was about reclaiming her dignity from the rubble of Mark's betrayal. "Are you sure about this?" Alan asked during their final meeting. His office was sparse but comfortable, the walls lined with credentials and a single family photo. "I've never been more certain of anything," Natalie replied, accepting the folder he handed her. Inside were additional photos, room service receipts, and a detailed timeline of Mark and Chloe's activities at the resort. "They're checking out Sunday?" Alan nodded. "And according to his calendar that you provided access to, he plans to tell you he's leaving for another certification the following Monday." "Perfect." Natalie slid the folder into her leather bag. "That gives me exactly what I need." Sunday evening, Natalie watched her husband return home through the bay window of their living room. He carried his suitcase with the casual confidence of a man who believed his deception was flawless. She observed how he checked his appearance in the car window before approaching the door, straightening his collar, running a hand through his hair, adjusting his expression from contentment to manufactured exhaustion. "Hey, honey," he called, dropping his keys in the ceramic dish she'd made in a pottery class during their 3rd anniversary. God, that course was brutal. The exams were impossible. Natalie embraced him, breathing in his scent. Underneath his familiar cologne lingered the faint trace of an unfamiliar perfume. "Poor baby," she murmured. "You must be exhausted." "Completely wiped out," Mark agreed, his hand tracing familiar patterns on her back. "But I passed with flying colors. The company's really happy." She poured him his favorite whiskey, 2 fingers with a single ice cube, and listened to the elaborate lies he'd constructed about instructors, coursework, and fellow engineers. The details were impressive. He'd clearly rehearsed them extensively. "Oh," he mentioned casually over dinner, "I just found out they need me for the advanced certification next week. It's the last one." I promise. Natalie took a deliberate sip of wine. Where is it this time? Seattle, he replied without hesitation. The company's expanding its Pacific Northwest division, and they need senior engineers certified on the new systems. She nodded sympathetically. You work so hard. When do you leave? Monday morning. Mark reached across the table to squeeze her hand. I'm sorry about all these trips. I know it's been a lot lately. Don't worry about it, Natalie said, squeezing back. I understand completely. The following morning, after Mark left for his fictional Seattle course, Natalie packed her own suitcase. She selected items she'd purchased specifically for this occasion. Clothes Mark had never seen, a new perfume, even different makeup than her usual style. She was creating a version of herself that would be unrecognizable to him at first glance, yet unmistakably familiar upon closer inspection. As she drove toward Malibu, Natalie reflected on the 15 years she'd invested in her marriage. The early days in their cramped apartment while she finished pharmacy school, the miscarriage in their 7th year that had nearly broken them both, the 3-year renovation of their dream home that they'd designed together, arguing over every doorknob and light fixture. All of it now filtered through the nauseating knowledge that while she'd been building their life, Mark had been constructing his escape. The Ocean View Resort and Spa rose from the coastline like a modern castle, all glass and clean lines designed to frame the Pacific's endless blue horizon. Natalie handed her keys to the valet, straightened her new sundress, and stepped into the soaring lobby with its 40-foot ceilings and panoramic ocean views. Welcome to Ocean View, the receptionist greeted. Checking in? Yes, Natalie smiled. Emma Thompson. I have a reservation for the Serenity Suite. The name felt strange on her tongue, her first act of deception in a story built entirely of lies. She'd chosen her middle name paired with her mother's maiden name, ensuring she wouldn't forget to respond if addressed. Of course, Ms. Thompson. We're delighted to have you with us. The receptionist processed her information. I see you've booked our couple's romance package. Will your partner be joining you? Natalie allowed her smile to fade slightly. Unfortunately, no. A last-minute work emergency. But I decided to come anyway. I understand. We'll make sure your stay is exceptional nonetheless. The woman handed her a key card. The Serenity Suite offers our finest ocean view. You've made an excellent choice. So I've heard, Natalie replied. I've been told it's quite spectacular. The suite was even more luxurious than the photos Alan had shown her. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Pacific like a living painting. The sprawling living area opened onto a private terrace with an infinity plunge pool that seemed to melt into the ocean beyond. Fresh flowers adorned every surface, and a bottle of champagne chilled in an ice bucket beside a welcome note. Natalie walked slowly through the space where, just days before, her husband had held another woman. She ran her fingers along the countertops, the furniture, the bed sheets. The housekeeping staff had removed all physical traces of the previous occupants, but Natalie could feel their presence lingering like ghosts. She unpacked methodically, arranging her new clothes in the closet where Mark's had hung. She placed her toiletries in the marble bathroom where he had showered with Chloe. She uncorked the champagne and poured herself a glass, carrying it to the terrace where they had watched the sunset together. Standing at the railing, Natalie gazed at the ocean stretching endlessly before her. The afternoon sun transformed the water into a tapestry of diamonds. Several floors below, resort guests lounged by the main pool. Couples walked hand in hand along the private beach, and children built sandcastles at the water's edge. And then she saw them. Mark and Chloe had not checked out on Sunday, as Alan had reported. They were seated at a poolside cabana, sharing what appeared to be a platter of fruit and cheese. Mark wore sunglasses and swim trunks Natalie had never seen before. Chloe wore a white bikini and a sheer cover-up, her blonde hair piled loosely atop her head. They were laughing, completely at ease, her husband's hand resting possessively on Chloe's knee. Natalie's champagne glass nearly slipped from her fingers. This wasn't part of the plan. They should have been gone by now. with Natalie using the week to gather herself before confronting Mark upon his return home. Instead, they were still here, in the same resort, at the same time. The universe had just accelerated her timeline. As if sensing her presence, Mark glanced up toward the terrace levels. Natalie stepped back instinctively, though she knew she was too far away to be recognized. She watched as he returned his attention to Chloe, leaning in to kiss her with comfortable familiarity. A calm determination settled over Natalie. She returned to the suite and reached for her phone. "Alan? It's Natalie. I need you to find out why they're still here, and I need it quickly." The morning sun streamed through the oceanfront windows of the Serenity Suite as Natalie reviewed Alan's overnight email. According to his sources at the resort, Mark had extended their stay by 4 days, charging the additional $10,000 to his personal credit card, a card Natalie didn't even know existed. The resort staff noted that Mr. and Mrs. Crawford were celebrating their 6-month anniversary of dating, with Mark telling the concierge he had something special planned. 6 months. Half a year of elaborate lies. Half a year of Natalie washing his clothes, cooking his meals, and managing their finances, while he constructed an alternate reality with another woman. She dressed carefully in white linen pants and a blue silk blouse that brought out the green in her eyes. Her strategy was simple, but required precise timing. She wouldn't approach Mark directly. Not yet. First, she needed to understand exactly what Chloe believed about the man they had both given their hearts to. At 9:38, Natalie made her way to the resort's acclaimed spa. Alan's intelligence indicated that Chloe had a massage scheduled for 10 o'clock, followed by the specialty Ocean Radiance facial. Natalie booked herself for the same facial, time to put her in the relaxation lounge immediately after Chloe's massage. The spa welcomed her with the gentle sound of flowing water and the soothing scent of lavender and sea salt. After changing into the plush robe provided, Natalie was escorted to the women's relaxation lounge, an intimate space with just 6 chaise lounges facing a wall of glass overlooking a private rock garden. She selected the lounge furthest from the door and pretended to read a magazine, her heart pounding as she waited. 15 minutes later, the door opened, and Chloe Richardson floated in, her face glowing from her massage, her movements languid and relaxed. She chose a chaise 2 seats away from Natalie, accepting a cup of herbal tea from the attendant with a warm smile. Natalie observed her husband's mistress over the rim of her own teacup. In person, Chloe radiated a genuine warmth that hadn't fully translated in Alan's photographs. She hummed softly to herself, seemingly content in her own world. "That melody is beautiful," Natalie commented after several minutes of silence. "I've been trying to place it." Chloe turned, her expression open and friendly. "Oh, it's from this obscure French film my boyfriend introduced me to. I can't get it out of my head." "Your boyfriend has good taste," Natalie replied, setting her magazine aside. "In films and in resorts. This place is magnificent." "Isn't it?" Chloe beamed. "It's our 2nd time here. We came for a weekend when we first started dating, and now we're celebrating our 6-month anniversary." "That's lovely. Congratulations." The words felt like glass in Natalie's mouth. "Thank you. I'm Emma, by the way." She extended her hand, using her cover name without hesitation. "Chloe." They shook hands, and Natalie felt a surreal disconnection from reality. She was touching the hand that had touched her husband, caressed him, held him. "Are you here with someone special, Emma?" Chloe asked. "I was supposed to be." Natalie sighed dramatically. Last-minute work emergency. The curse of dating a successful man. "Oh, I understand completely." Chloe's expression turned sympathetic. "My boyfriend's the same way, constantly in demand." "What does he do?" "He's an engineering consultant for major development projects." Chloe's face lit up with pride. "He travels all over the country advising on these massive construction projects. He just got back from San Diego last week." "That sounds fascinating," Natalie encouraged. "You must miss him when he's gone." "I do, but it's worth it." He's brilliant at what he does. Chloe tucked her legs beneath her on the chaise. What about your boyfriend? What pulled him away from paradise? Natalie allowed a small laugh. He's in engineering too, actually. Had to fly to Seattle unexpectedly. No way. What are the odds? Chloe's eyes widened. Maybe they know each other. The engineering world can be surprisingly small, Natalie agreed, steering the conversation back to safer ground. So, 6 months together? That's a wonderful milestone. Best 6 months of my life, Chloe confided, lowering her voice slightly. Between us, I think he might be planning something special. He's been acting mysterious, taking phone calls in private. A cold weight settled in Natalie's stomach. Really? How exciting. I don't want to jinx it, but Chloe leaned closer, her expression simultaneously guilty and thrilled. I found a browser tab open on his laptop last week. He was looking at engagement rings. The teacup trembled in Natalie's hand. Her husband of 15 years was planning to propose to a woman who didn't know he was already married. The sheer audacity of it struck her like a physical blow. Natalie struggled to find words. That's quite a commitment after 6 months. When you know, you know. Chloe shrugged happily. And we've talked about it. He's never been married, never found the right person until now. We both want the same things. A home in the suburbs, a couple of kids, maybe a dog. Each word was a fresh cut. The home in the suburbs they were planning was eerily similar to the one Natalie had already built with Mark. The children they dreamed of echoed the pregnancy she had lost, after which Mark had claimed he wasn't ready to try again. Ms. Richardson? A spa attendant appeared at the doorway. We're ready for your facial. That's me. Chloe stood, retying her robe. It was lovely chatting with you, Emma. Maybe I'll see you around the resort. I'm sure you will, Natalie replied with a calm she didn't feel. Enjoy your facial. When Chloe disappeared, Natalie canceled her own appointment, claiming a sudden migraine. She returned to her suite and stood in the center of the living room, her mind racing. The information she'd gathered was far worse than she had imagined. Mark wasn't just having an affair. He was creating an entire second life, complete with marriage plans. Her phone buzzed with a text from Alan. Found something. Mark made dinner reservations for 2 at the resort's fine dining restaurant. Tonight at 8, table overlooking the ocean. Natalie stared at the message, a plan forming in her mind. If Mark was planning something special for their anniversary, perhaps it was time for Natalie to make some plans of her own. She opened her suitcase and removed the red dress she'd purchased specifically for this confrontation. A design unlike anything in her normal wardrobe, but one that highlighted every advantage of her 41 years. She laid it carefully on the bed, alongside the new stiletto heels and the diamond earrings Mark had given her for their 10th anniversary. Tonight, Emma Thompson would join the resort's other guests for dinner. And if she happened to be seated near a certain couple celebrating their relationship milestone, well, that would simply be an unfortunate coincidence for Mark Crawford. As Natalie prepared for the evening ahead, she realized that something unexpected had happened during her conversation with Chloe. She didn't hate this woman who had unwittingly become entangled in Mark's web of deception. In fact, she felt an unsettling kinship with her. They had both fallen in love with the same man. Both believed his promises. Both built their futures around his lies. By the time night fell over the Ocean View Resort, Natalie was ready. She had spent 15 years being the perfect wife. Now, she would become the perfect stranger. The Ocean View's signature restaurant occupied the resort's highest point, with 3 glass walls offering panoramic views of the moonlit Pacific. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over white tablecloths and gleaming silverware. A pianist played softly in the corner, his melodies blending with the gentle murmur of conversations and the occasional clink of fine china. Natalie arrived at 7:45, having carefully timed her entrance to precede Mark and Chloe. The hostess consulted her reservation list. Ms. Thompson, welcome. Would you prefer oceanfront or garden view this evening? Oceanfront, please, Natalie replied. And if possible, something quiet and intimate. Of course. The hostess led her to a table positioned perfectly, not directly adjacent to where Mark and Chloe would be seated, but close enough to be visible while partially obscured by an elegant arrangement of orchids. "Your server will be with you momentarily." Natalie ordered a glass of Cabernet Sauvignon and pretended to study the menu while her pulse thundered in her ears. At 7 minutes past 8, she heard the hostess's voice again. "Mr. and Mrs. Crawford, your table is ready." Natalie's eyes remained fixed on the menu as Mark and Chloe followed the hostess to their reserved table just 15 feet away. From her vantage point behind the flower arrangement, Natalie could see them clearly while remaining relatively hidden. Mark wore a navy suit she'd never seen before with a light blue tie that matched his eyes. Chloe was stunning in a silver dress that caught the light with each movement. Mark pulled out her chair with practiced gallantry, the same gesture he'd performed for Natalie countless times over 15 years of marriage. "Happy anniversary, beautiful," she heard Mark say as they sat down. His voice, the same voice that had whispered "I love you" to Natalie that morning, was soft with affection. "6 incredible months," Chloe replied, reaching across the table to intertwine her fingers with his. "I still can't believe how lucky I am." Their server appeared at Natalie's table. "Have you decided on your entree, ma'am?" "The seared scallops, please," Natalie responded, deliberately raising her voice just enough. She noted the slight stiffening of Mark's shoulders, the momentary pause in his movement. His back was to her, but she knew her husband's body language intimately. He'd recognized her voice, but was likely convincing himself he was mistaken. The first course arrived for both tables. Natalie sipped her wine and maintained her composure, while covertly observing the couple. They were completely absorbed in each other, sharing bites of their appetizers and speaking in the intimate shorthand of people who believed they shared something special. "Remember our first date?" Chloe asked, her expression playful. "You were so nervous you knocked over your water glass." Mark laughed. "I was terrified you wouldn't give me a second chance." "As if I could resist," Chloe teased. "Not when you showed up with those little architectural sketches of my dream house on napkins." Natalie nearly choked on her wine. Those napkin sketches were a signature move Mark had used on her 17 years ago, when they'd first met at her friend's wedding. He'd claimed to design her perfect home while they danced, then presented the detailed drawings with a flourish. She'd been charmed by his creativity, never imagining he'd recycle the same routine for another woman nearly 2 decades later. As their main courses arrived, Natalie decided it was time to accelerate her plan. She signaled her server. "I seem to have dropped my napkin," she said when he approached. "Would you mind bringing me a fresh one?" When the server returned with the napkin, Natalie deliberately knocked over her water glass. The crash and splash caught the attention of several nearby diners, including Mark and Chloe. "Oh, I'm so sorry," Natalie exclaimed, loud enough to be heard. As she helped the server mop up the spill, she positioned herself to be fully visible to Mark's table. She felt Mark's eyes on her instantly. Through her peripheral vision, she saw him freeze mid-sentence, his fork suspended halfway to his mouth. She turned slightly, allowing him a clear view of her profile, while pretending to be unaware of his presence. The color drained from Mark's face. He set down his fork with a shaking hand and whispered something urgently to Chloe, who looked concerned. "Are you all right?" the server asked Natalie. "Perfectly fine," she replied with a warm smile. "These things happen. Thank you for your help." When the commotion subsided, Natalie returned to her meal, maintaining the charade of a woman dining contentedly alone. She could practically feel Mark's panic radiating across the room. He was now seated rigidly in his chair, his back unnaturally straight, stealing glances at her between forced conversational snippets with Chloe. "Is something wrong?" Natalie heard Chloe ask him. "You look like you've seen a ghost." No, Mark assured her unconvincingly. "Just remembered an email I forgot to send before we left the room." Natalie waited until they were midway through their entrees before implementing the next phase of her plan. She pulled out her phone and pretended to answer a call. "Emma Thompson speaking," she said clearly. "Oh, hello there." She launched into an animated conversation with her imaginary caller, occasionally laughing and gesturing with her free hand. She mentioned engineering projects, Seattle business trips, and work-life balance, all while never once looking directly at Mark and Chloe's table. Mark was now visibly sweating. He loosened his tie and gulped his water, his meal largely untouched. Chloe's expression had shifted from romantic to concerned, her hand reaching across the table to touch his arm questioningly. When the dessert menus arrived, Natalie decided it was time for the direct approach. She stood, smoothed her red dress, and walked deliberately toward the restrooms, which required her to pass directly by Mark and Chloe's table. As she approached, she allowed her gaze to land on them naturally, as if noticing them for the first time. She stopped, her expression shifting to one of pleased surprise. "Chloe," she said warmly, "from the spa this morning? What a lovely coincidence." Chloe brightened with recognition. "Emma, how nice to see you again." Mark sat frozen, his knuckles white around his water glass, his eyes darting between the two women in undisguised horror. "I hope you enjoyed your facial," Natalie continued, deliberately ignoring Mark. "Mine was unfortunately cancelled due to a migraine." "It was wonderful," Chloe replied. Then, with a genuine smile, she gestured to Mark. "Emma, this is my boyfriend, Mark. Mark, this is Emma. We met at the spa this morning." Mark's face was ashen as he forced himself to turn toward Natalie. Their eyes met for the first time that evening, his wide with terror, hers cool and composed. "Pleasure to meet you, Mark." Natalie extended her hand. "Emma Thompson." Mark had no choice but to take her hand, his own clammy with stress. "Hello," he managed, his voice barely audible. "Emma's boyfriend is also in engineering," Chloe explained cheerfully. "Isn't that a coincidence? He got called away to Seattle on business." "Seattle?" Natalie repeated, holding Mark's gaze. "My goodness, what are the odds? Mark, what area of engineering do you specialize in? Perhaps you know my boyfriend." Mark opened his mouth, but no sound emerged. Sweat beaded visibly on his forehead. "He's a structural engineering consultant," Chloe answered proudly when Mark remained silent. "He works on major projects all over the country." "How fascinating," Natalie smiled. "My boyfriend is in civil engineering. Bridges, mostly. In fact, he just finished a major certification course in San Diego last week." Mark abruptly stood, nearly knocking over his chair. Excuse me," he stammered. "I need some air." Before either woman could respond, he strode rapidly toward the restaurant's exit, leaving Chloe staring after him in confusion. "I'm sorry," Chloe said, clearly embarrassed. "He hasn't been himself tonight. I think he's nervous about something." "No need to apologize," Natalie assured her, taking the seat Mark had vacated. "Men can be so mysterious sometimes, can't they? One minute they're fine, the next they're completely undone by the smallest things." Chloe nodded, glancing toward the door where Mark had disappeared. "He's been acting strange all evening, taking phone calls in the bathroom, checking his watch every 5 minutes. Perhaps he has something on his mind," Natalie suggested. "Something important he's planning?" A blush crept into Chloe's cheeks. "I've been wondering. Our 6-month anniversary seems like an odd time to be so nervous unless he's planning to ask a very important question?" Natalie completed the thought. "Is it crazy to think that after just 6 months?" Chloe asked, her voice dropping to a whisper. "We haven't known each other that long, but it feels like we've been together forever." Something twisted painfully in Natalie's chest. This woman wasn't just a fling to Mark. She was a complete replacement, a younger version of the life he'd already built and apparently grown tired of. "I don't think it's crazy at all," Natalie said softly. "When you know, right?" "Exactly." Chloe's expression brightened. "That's what Mark always says. He told me he's never felt this way about anyone before, that he's been waiting his whole life to build a future with someone who truly understands him." Each word was a dagger, but Natalie maintained her composed facade. "And you believe him?" "With all my heart," Chloe replied without hesitation. "Mark is the most honest, devoted man I've ever met. He says what he means and follows through on every promise. It's what I love most about him." Natalie nodded slowly, making her decision. This wasn't just about confronting Mark anymore. It was about the truth, a truth that Chloe deserved as much as she did. "Chloe," she began carefully, "what would you say if I told you—" She was interrupted by Mark's return. He stood at the edge of the table, his face composed into a rigid mask of control. "Chloe, we need to go," he said flatly. "Now!" Chloe looked up in surprise. "What? We haven't had dessert yet, and I was just chatting with Emma." "It's an emergency," Mark insisted, not meeting Natalie's eyes. "Please, is everything okay?" Chloe asked, concern replacing her confusion. "I'll explain in the room," Mark replied, already pulling out Chloe's chair. "We really need to go." Chloe stood reluctantly. "I'm so sorry, Emma. It was lovely talking with you again." "Don't worry about it," Natalie smiled. "I'm sure we'll see each other again very soon." Mark flinched at her words, finally meeting her gaze. In that brief moment of eye contact, Natalie communicated everything she needed to. "I know everything. This ends now." As Mark practically dragged Chloe from the restaurant, Natalie remained seated, calmly finishing her wine. The night wasn't over yet. In fact, it was just beginning. She signaled for the check, left a generous tip, and walked unhurriedly toward the elevator. In her purse, her phone buzzed with a text from Alan. "He's packing. Looks like they're planning to check out tonight." Natalie smiled to herself as she pressed the button for her floor. Mark could run, but he couldn't hide. Not anymore. The elevator doors slid open on Natalie's floor, revealing a harried Mark pacing the hallway outside her suite. He froze when he saw her, his face contorted with panic and disbelief. "What are you doing here?" he hissed, advancing toward her with jerky movements. "Are you insane? What kind of sick game are you playing?" Natalie stepped out of the elevator with deliberate calm. "I'm not playing any games, Mark. Unlike you, I deal in truth. You need to leave. Now." His voice trembled with desperation. "I told Chloe I forgot something important in the business center. I have maybe 5 minutes before she starts wondering where I am." "5 minutes," Natalie echoed. 15 years together, and you think you can erase me in 5 minutes? Mark ran his fingers through his hair, his composure crumbling. "This isn't what you think. It's complicated. Actually, it's remarkably simple." Natalie unlocked her suite door and held it open. "Inside. Unless you'd prefer to have this conversation in the hallway where anyone might hear." Mark hesitated, then slipped past her into the suite. When the door closed behind them, he began pacing again, his movements those of a cornered animal. "How did you find me? How did you know?" "You told your secretary you were at a training course," Natalie replied, setting her purse on the console table. "I called to check when you'd be finished. Imagine my surprise when she told me you were on vacation." Mark's shoulders slumped. "Natalie, I can explain." "Can you explain giving another woman your last name?" Natalie cut him off. "Can you explain looking at engagement rings when you already have a wife? Can you explain telling Chloe you've never been married when we celebrated our 15th anniversary 3 months ago?" Each question landed like a physical blow. Mark collapsed onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands. "She thinks I'm single," he mumbled through his fingers. "I know exactly what she thinks," Natalie said. "We had quite an illuminating conversation at the spa this morning, and again at dinner, right before you fled the restaurant like you'd seen a ghost." She leaned against the wall, studying him. "Which, in a way, you had. The ghost of the wife you erased." Mark looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. "What are you going to do?" "That depends," Natalie replied. "What were you planning to do? Propose to her with the rings you were researching? Commit bigamy? Or were you finally going to ask me for a divorce?" "I was going to tell you after this trip," Mark said, his voice barely audible. "I was going to come clean about everything. Natalie laughed without humor. Like you came clean about the fake training courses, the non-existent certification exams, the business trips that never happened? I didn't mean for any of this to happen, Mark insisted. Chloe and I met at that conference in Denver. It was supposed to be a one-time thing. But then what? Natalie demanded. You decided our 15 years together meant nothing compared to 6 months with her? It wasn't like that. Mark stood suddenly. You and I, we became different people. You were always at the pharmacy, always putting your patients first. We stopped talking about anything real years ago. Natalie felt a surge of cold fury. So rather than address those issues with your wife, you created an elaborate fiction and found yourself a replacement? A younger model who doesn't know about your snoring or your mother's drinking problem, or the fact that you're terrible with money? Mark flinched. Chloe understands me. Chloe understands the version of you that you invented, Natalie corrected him. The single, never-married man without baggage or history. That person doesn't exist, Mark. A knock at the door shattered the tension between them. Mark froze, his eyes wide with terror. Emma? Are you in there? Chloe's voice came through the door. The concierge said he saw Mark come up to this floor. Natalie and Mark stared at each other in silence, he pleading wordlessly, she contemplating her next move. I know you're both in there, Chloe continued, her voice wavering slightly. Please, open the door. I just want to understand what's happening. With a decision made, Natalie crossed to the door and opened it. Chloe stood in the hallway, her silver dress sparkling in the dim light, her expression a mixture of confusion, hurt, and determination. Come in, Chloe, Natalie said gently. I think it's time we all had an honest conversation. Chloe stepped into the suite, her eyes immediately finding Mark. What's going on? She demanded. Why did you run out of the restaurant? Why are you in Emma's room? Do you two know each other? Mark seemed to shrink under her questioning. His mouth opened and closed, but no words emerged. My name isn't Emma, Natalie said quietly. It's Natalie. Natalie Crawford. Chloe's brow furrowed. Crawford? Like Mark's last name? Are you his sister? No. Natalie held up her left hand, where her wedding band caught the light. I'm his wife. The color drained from Chloe's face. She reached blindly for the wall to steady herself. His wife? We've been married for 15 years, Natalie continued, her voice gentle despite the cruelty of the truth she was delivering. I'm a pharmacist in Calabasas. We own a home together. Mark told me he was attending engineering certification courses these past months when he was actually with you. Chloe turned to Mark, who stood immobile in the center of the room. Tell me she's lying, she whispered. Tell me this is some kind of horrible joke. When Mark remained silent, tears filled Chloe's eyes. You told me you'd never been married. You said you were waiting for the right person. I'm sorry, Mark finally managed, the words hollow and insufficient. Sorry? Chloe's voice rose with disbelief. You let me believe we had a future together. You introduced me to your parents. Natalie felt as though she'd been struck. You took her to meet Eleanor and Richard? Mark nodded miserably. Over Christmas. I told you I had that conference in Chicago. They knew you were married, Chloe realized, her expression hardening. They sat across from me at dinner, listening to me talk about our future together, and they knew. They've always protected him, Natalie said, a strange camaraderie forming between her and her husband's mistress, even from himself. Chloe sank onto the sofa, burying her face in her hands. 6 months of my life. 6 months of planning and dreaming and believing. Try 15 years, Natalie said without rancor. 15 years of building a life with someone who could throw it away without a backward glance. Mark looked between them, panic growing in his eyes as he realized they were finding common ground. Now wait a minute. This isn't fair. You're making me sound like some kind of monster. Both women turned to him with nearly identical expressions of incredulity. You were planning to propose to her, Natalie stated flatly, while still married to me. You told me your parents were excited to finally have grandchildren, Chloe added. when they already have a daughter-in-law? Mark backed away, hands raised defensively. I was caught in the middle. I didn't know how to fix it without hurting everyone. So instead you hurt everyone, Natalie observed. Masterful solution. Chloe wiped her tears with the back of her hand, smearing her mascara. Did you ever actually love me? Or was I just an escape from your real life? Mark looked genuinely pained. Of course I loved you. I still do. What we have is real. And what about me? Natalie asked quietly. Was our marriage real? Or was that just marking time until someone better came along? That's not fair, Mark protested. We had good years, Natalie. You know we did. We had a life, Natalie corrected him. A life you were willing to throw away, rather than face its imperfections. Chloe stood suddenly, straightening her shoulders despite the tears still streaming down her face. I can't do this. I can't stand here listening to you try to justify loving both of us at once. She turned to Natalie, woman to woman. I didn't know. I swear to you, I had no idea he was married. I believe you, Natalie said, and she meant it. He fooled us both, just in different ways. Chloe nodded, then faced Mark one final time. Don't call me. Don't text. Don't show up at my door with explanations or apologies. You're a married man, and you've been living a lie. Whatever we had, whatever I thought we had, is over. She moved toward the door with dignity, despite her tear-stained face and trembling hands. At the threshold, she paused to look back at Natalie. I'm truly sorry for the pain I unknowingly caused you. When the door closed behind Chloe, silence engulfed the suite. Mark stood motionless, as if unable to process what had just happened. Natalie watched him, this stranger she had shared her life with, and felt an unexpected sense of clarity. She's stronger than I would have been at her age, Natalie observed. You chose well for your second life. Mark sank into a chair, looking suddenly old and deflated. What happens now? Now? Natalie picked up her phone from the console table. Now, I call the front desk and change my flight to tomorrow morning instead of Friday. I go home to our house, which will soon be just my house, and I call my lawyer. You stay here in this beautiful resort where you've created so many special memories, and you figure out how to live with yourself. Just like that? Mark looked up at her with disbelief. 15 years? Ended in a hotel room? Our marriage ended the moment you decided to create a second life, Natalie replied. This is just the acknowledgement of what you've already done. Mark buried his face in his hands. I never meant to hurt you, Natalie. I never wanted it to end like this. I believe you, she said, surprising herself with the truth of it. I don't think you're malicious, Mark. Just breathtakingly selfish and cowardly. She moved to the bedroom and began packing her things, methodically folding the new clothes she'd bought for this confrontation. Mark followed, hovering in the doorway. Is there anything I can say? He asked. Anything I can do to make this easier? Natalie paused, considering his question seriously. You could try honesty. Just once, as a novelty. I did love you, he said quietly. For a long time, I loved our life together. I know. She zipped her suitcase closed. That's what makes this so sad. You threw away something real for a fantasy that couldn't last. And now I've lost both of you. Natalie studied him, the husband she had loved for 15 years, the man she had planned to grow old beside. She felt neither hatred nor rage, just a profound weariness and an unexpected sense of freedom. You haven't just lost us, Mark. You've lost yourself. The man I married wouldn't have been capable of this level of deception. Somewhere along the way, you became someone else entirely, and I'm not sure even you know who that person is anymore. She lifted her suitcase from the bed. I'm going to sleep in another room tonight. I suggest you do the same. What will you tell people? Mark asked. Our friends? My family? The truth, Natalie replied simply. That's the difference between us now. I have nothing to hide. As she moved toward the door, Mark called after her one last time. I really am sorry, Natalie. She turned to look at him. This man who had been the center of her world for so long. I know you are. But sorry doesn't change anything. It doesn't rebuild trust, or erase lies, or heal broken hearts. It's just a word, Mark, and we've had enough words between us. Natalie closed the door behind her, leaving her husband alone in the suite that had witnessed the final unraveling of their marriage. In the quiet hallway, she felt an unexpected lightness spreading through her chest. The weight of suspicion and betrayal she'd carried these past weeks was lifting, replaced by the certain knowledge that, whatever came next, it would be of her own making. As she requested a new room at the front desk, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in the polished marble wall, a woman in a red dress, standing straight-backed and clear-eyed despite everything. She hardly recognized herself, yet somehow felt more authentic than she had in years. 3 months later, Natalie sat at an outdoor cafe in downtown Calabasas, reviewing paperwork for the divorce her lawyer had just finalized. The autumn sun warmed her shoulders as she signed the last document and closed the folder. "Excuse me," a voice said. "Is this seat taken?" Natalie looked up to find Chloe standing beside her table, looking different than she had at the resort. Her hair was shorter, her style more professional in tailored pants and a simple blouse. "Please," Natalie gestured to the empty chair. "Join me." As Chloe settled across from her, an unexpected smile broke across Natalie's face. Their paths had crossed by chance at a pharmaceutical conference where Chloe was managing the event design. What had begun as an awkward encounter had evolved, surprisingly, into something resembling friendship. Two women united by the peculiar experience of loving and losing the same unworthy man. "Just sign the final papers," Natalie said, tapping the folder. "How does it feel?" Chloe asked, genuine concern in her eyes. Natalie considered the question. "Like closing a book I've read too many times. I know how the story ends, and I'm ready for something new." "To new beginnings, then." Chloe raised her water glass in a toast. Natalie clinked her own glass against it. "And to the unexpected friendships we find along the way." As they sat in companionable conversation, Natalie reflected on the strange journey that had brought her here. She had lost a husband, but reclaimed herself. She had confronted her worst fears and emerged stronger. And most surprisingly of all, she had found understanding and connection where she least expected it, with the woman who might have replaced her. Life, Natalie was discovering, had a way of revealing its most profound truths in the aftermath of its greatest deceptions. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And drop a comment below. What city are you watching from? And if your heart tells you to, feel free to leave me a tip on Buy Me a Coffee. Just check the first pinned comment. Thanks for keeping me company and for the coffee, and I'll see you in the next story.